Welcome to Beast TV. So you think audio recording isn't important? Think again. You better get you a fresh dip and buckle up. Larry Porst II, how you doing tonight?
I'm hanging in there, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. You dodging that corona?
Dodging corona, tornadoes, all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's been pretty rough out there.
No doubt about that.
And we hope all of our listeners are practicing safe practices. And I don't know, Larry. I keep thinking about that White Snake song. Here we go again. And really, the context is we're talking to somebody again tonight that's way smarter than us.
No doubt about that.
So I hope we both got on our thinking caps.
Hey, that's the only way you learn, though. You talk to people smarter than you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So, I tell you, without further ado, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest?
All right. Tonight we have on an audio analyst guru all the way from the great state of Washington. His name is David Ellis. He is part of the Olympic Project, and he's not only an audio analyst, but he also is great in the field, casting tracks, and I mean all kinds of good stuff. He's already showed some stuff to me that has me perplexed and ready to hear the story. So let's go ahead and bring David on. David, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Larry. How about yourself?
Doing great. Glad you're here.
Yeah, we're just tickled to death to have you, David.
Well, I'm tickled to death to be here. And after that intro, I'm not quite sure who you were describing. I thought maybe I was on the wrong program.
Well, I wasn't talking about Mark, so you're on the right program.
Okay. David, before we get started, why don't you just introduce yourself and give us some background about where you grew up along with your family life? Maybe there's some non-Bigfoot hobbies you might have or anything else that our audience might find interesting.
Well, let's see. If we want to go all the way back to the beginning, I'm born and raised here in the state of Washington. Actually, Saturday is my birthday, so I'm getting 1 year older. But I've been in Washington all of 68 years. So this is my home. So grew up in Vancouver, Washington. If you've ever heard of Portland, Oregon, you know where Vancouver, Washington is then, because it's right next door, just across the Columbia River. And then ended up going to finishing college at the University of Washington and stayed in the Seattle area. I did take a little brief hiatus after college and went fishing in Southeast Alaska, salmon fishing on a purse seining boat. So done a little manual labor. That was a fun experience. It was more like a paid vacation than anything, but I may have to wind that back. I can remember a 172-hour period where I got 15 minutes of sleep. So yeah, that was fun. So I decided maybe I should use my college education, and I got into actually sales. I sold boats in the Seattle market for a period of time, and then migrated to the electrical industry and ended up in the lighting field
Ooh.
and worked for some major manufacturers doing that. In the meantime, married around 1980. So this year will be our 40th wedding anniversary. Raised two kids. Have one grandson that just arrived here a few months ago. So family life is great. But somewhere along the line, I decided that I would check in on Bigfooting, and I kind of followed that over the internet for a few years. And then in 2005, I ended up going to a Bigfoot conference and meeting a group of people that introduced me to going out in the field and doing some camping and seeing kind of what happened. But I was looking for a little bit more. I wanted more documentation, so I came upon some impressions at this one specific lake that I thought were kind of interesting, and then taught myself how to cast impressions. And then from there, I started doing audio recording back in 2007. I had an interesting experience where I could hear something very plainly with the bionic dish that I was using, but I didn't record it. So I thought, this isn't going to work. I need to document. So I learned how to, or I taught myself how to record and listen at the same time. And I started getting into all sorts of different ways of field recording, and really just ended up where the way I do it now is just place a recorder out in the field and let it sit and do its thing. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. If you want me to discuss a little bit more about the Olympic project, we can do that a little bit later if you want.
Absolutely. Now, let's rewind just a little bit.
Okay.
And as a young boy, your grandfather told you of an unusual sighting he witnessed. Would you tell us what he told you and what happened to you and some friends 2 or 3 years later?
Okay. So I'm not quite sure what age period I was, but it was in the 50s. So it could have been 6, 7 years old when my grandfather told of a time when he was cutting hay. It was summertime, and the hay needed to be cut so that he could bring it in for the winter. So he was on his tractor, and up popped what he described to me was a 5-foot tall monkey. He said that it was about shoulder height above the hay, and he figured the hay was about 4 foot tall. So that's how he came to the conclusion it was around 5 foot tall. But he said it ran on 2 legs across the field and hopped the fence and into the woods. So now I'm a 6 or 7 year old kid thinking that there's monkeys living in the woods. So my grandmother periodically, when I was over there, would send me to the mailbox to get the mail. And it was about 3/4 of a mile down the road. And I had to go by these woods. And that was a long walk. So nothing ever happened. I'm still here to tell it. But about 5 years later, I was 11 years old, 1963, when this happened. A group of neighborhood kids, we had this field that we played in that was a 40-acre cow pasture. And it had been previously a logged area, maybe 30, 40 years prior to us being there, it was logged. But they used the old spring and buckboard method. They only harvested the tree from about 12 feet off the ground. So they left these large edifices, stumps. And we called it the stump field. So we would go there and play, and there was all sorts of things hiding in those stumps. We found lizards and snakes, and all the things that would keep kids active and going back to the area. So we were just headed, and it was September. I remember that part. We were headed towards the opposite side of the field, and one of the kids grabbed a stick and started banging it on a tree limb. And all of a sudden, I could see large alder trees, and I'm going to guess by height that they were at least 12 inches in diameter, and they were shaking like they were toothpicks. They were just waving back and forth like that, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Then the next thing I can remember is I thought something maybe fell out of the trees, but then I realized that limbs like in 2 inch diameter were being snapped off the tree. And then all of a sudden something just cut loose with a scream that I later described to my parents as the cross between an elephant trumpeting and a lion roaring. I vividly remember it being two different sounds at the same time. It had a high component and a very low rumble component to it. And we were 30 feet, 10 yards maybe from it. We couldn't see it because it was deep in the brush. But I do remember picking myself up off the ground after hearing this scream that went on for 12 seconds.
Oh.
So I'm not sure if I passed out, fainted, but the next thing I remember is coming to, standing up and yelling, "Run." And everybody, we all ran home. And I was so excited that my dad said that I dang near tore the screen door off the door trying to get in the house.
Oh.
Excuse me. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting experience. From that following week, I had a library class where the librarian would like to find out your interests so that she could steer you to books to read. And she said, "Did anything interesting happen over the weekend?" Wow. And like a rocket, and I went over the story, and about halfway through the library class, when everybody was busy reading their books, I get this tap on my shoulder. "David, come with me for a second." So she pulled me aside and she started grilling me, asking me questions about the scream and the howl, and was I sure it wasn't a cow, or was it a bear, or had I heard a bear before, and all. And I was pretty adamant. I wasn't shaken from, I had no clue what this was. It was just the strangest thing ever. She said, "Well, I think I have a book for you to read. It's an adult book." And it was, she said, "I'll get it for you if you think that you would like to read up about it." And I said, "Sure." And so come to find out, it was Ivan Sanderson's Abominable Legend, Snowman Come to Life. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book, but if that's not in your library, you should get it.
Wow.
So she picked up on what she thought I might have experienced.
Wow.
Did she ever talk about herself having an experience?
No. She just out of the blue, that one.
Huh.
Yeah. So she was pretty responsible librarian, I'd say.
Yeah. So that kind of stoked the fire that led you to where you're at now.
Yeah.
How you kind of got started with the Olympic project.
Yeah. That's kind of a long story, so I'll try to keep it short. But I started out with a group called WABFR, which is a group of BFRO group folks here in Washington. And they really took me under their wing, and I learned quite a bit from this group, and I still converse with quite a few of them. But I started working with witnesses. I wasn't really into taking a report and then going and doing a day investigation and then dropping it. My predilection is to know more and more and more information. So I found value in working with one witness over longer periods of time. And my first witness that I worked with him for about 5 years. And
Wow.
just, we really gained a tremendous amount of information and knowledge. And I really honed my skills. So I think it's a better way to go if you get a witness and they're willing to work with you. It's better to do it that way than going from like a what's the lawyer term where they go from one client to the next.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So yeah, I found it much more enjoyable. Learned a lot more because there is a personal component to this, which people don't usually talk about. The witness, they're going through quite a bit. They're going through a lot of trauma, and so I found it more interesting to learn about their interaction and how it affected them, and try to keep it, more on a normal, well, think about it this way or think about it that way, because there's some times where that trauma really hits hard.
Right. So through the 5 year deal, what were you able to find out that you wouldn't have found out in a short period of time? I mean, did you find out just?
I think what I found was that the willingness of the witness to talk to me about, they would continually go back to the area, and I would come down on the weekends, but they would go out during the week and
Okay.
would relate what was going on, what was happening, and consistently hearing specific types of vocalizations and specific types of knocks. And one of the things that I discovered over that period of time is that whatever it was that was tracking him seemed to be getting closer and closer and closer. So there became a familiarity to him. And so
Right.
I think that there is that component to it as well. So, it's who's watching who.
Right.
Exactly. No doubt about that. We go there looking to observe them, but they're always observing us.
Oh yeah, they have to be one step ahead,
Right.
or two.
Definitely.
Let's talk about how you got involved with the
Okay.
Olympic project.
Okay. Well, it was actually out of this 5 year study that I've been working with this gentleman. He started collecting hair that he was finding, and we came upon one area where there was like 35 scat piles
Wow.
in a specific area, and I had never seen anything like that before. And what I noticed was that near this location that we had been working was a horse pen that had a shed, and they were feeding the horses oats. And one of the things that I remember from my grandfather was a terminology that he used, that you can't feed cows too much oats. He would say it's hot for their system. In other words, giving it diarrhea.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that this list 35 scat piles or so that we had found were all a diarrhea scenario. So it was like maybe it got into the oats and
Yeah.
and it really didn't sit well. And also they seemed the hairs that he was finding seemed to be where they were rubbing their behind on 4-inch in diameter fir trees. So we were collecting hair from there, and about that time, I was working or conversing a lot with one of the Olympic Project members, Rich Germeau. He and Derek Randalls started the Olympic Project. And Rich was saying that they were looking for some uh, samples that possibly might have DNA on them. So um, he convinced us that we should get some of the hair samples to the Olympic Project so they could get it into this DNA study project. Well, that's when I started conversing with Derek, and we hit it off, and Rich and I were already hitting it off well. And so they invited me to become a member in the Olympic Project back in 2010. And so from there, it's been just, I couldn't have asked for or got more lucky to be involved with a group of dedicated researchers. Derek is one of the best guys in the whole world to work with as far as Bigfooting research. So I feel very, very, very fortunate to have crossed paths.
You know, we had Shane Corson on here, and we were just
I pay him, you know.
Do what?
I pay him.
Oh,
I pay. So him and Amy, I pay them good money. So yeah. Now, what were you saying?
Well, the thing is we were just so impressed with what the Olympic Project does, and it's similar to the way that we go about our research, but y'all were just light years ahead of us. And it's good for us to have mentors out there that are open and willing to share what they're doing, that we might be able to apply some of those nuggets in our strategy.
Well, I'm very appreciative of you using the term mentor because I stand on the shoulders of many. I what I do, I have honed myself, but I learned from so many people. Stan Courtney was one of the first audiophiles that I really admired coming up through the Bigfooting world, and I got a chance to meet him, and that was really, really special. There's a gentleman that has really, I consider my personal mentor, Mananga Hala. He has really brought me along and taught me so many different things that I'm really appreciative. Paul Graves, another one within that was in the Olympic Project. He works mostly independently, but he and I chat from time to time and really enjoy his knowledge. John Andrews, one of the vocalizations that we're going to play tonight and look at, he recorded. He's recorded some of the best field recordings in the industry or in our world. So really, I stand on the shoulders of others that have come before me as well. So I can appreciate that.
Well, looks like you're going to have to pay out some checks.
Yeah.
Larry, have you got any more questions about the Olympic Project?
Well, I'd like to ask David. I know it's a multifaceted.
Oh boy, are we? Holy smokes.
So what is your favorite part of the Olympic Project? What do you enjoy the most of it?
I think our lack of structure. Now you might wonder, what is he talking about? Well, we don't have meetings every Tuesday or monthly meetings. We are a group of people that really enjoy our company and friendship and diversity. I don't know everything there is to know about going into the woods, but if you're going to be a part of the Olympic Project on any expedition or anything like that, you are safe. There are people that know how to take care of you. There are people that know how to collect things forensically. There are people that know how to make cast impressions, collect recordings, analyze hair visually. Cindy Dosen, part of the Olympic Project, she does a wonderful job of that. We have mostly people that are take the bull by the horns and get things accomplished, and then make that knowledge known to the group. And then when the group has a need for that particular knowledge, you can go to them. So we just really probably enjoy our friendship more than anything. But we have a strong desire to collect evidence properly. We are not scientists, but if we collect it in a method that scientists can then utilize the information, I think we're steps ahead of the game. So that's what we try to teach people, how to do that. If you're going to be in the field and you want to do this properly, there's some techniques that you can use. Take them or leave them, but we will teach them to you.
That's refreshing to know.
Oh.
I'm going to go ahead and ask one question. I do not know if you're familiar with it, but Rob Childers would like to know about Donna and Greg's property and the vocals.
Sure. That's an interesting scenario. We worked a study area with a wife and husband that were having activity at their house. There was things that brought us there as a group. Actually, Derek was working with Donna for about a year and a half before I was brought in, because she finally confided that she was hearing some noises, some sounds. So I went down to their home, met them, and asked them to take me around the area. And we got to a location maybe a quarter of a mile from their house. And I said, I'm going to try something here, a wood knock, and see if we get a response. And I have this methodology where I clap my hands in front of my mouth and make a knocking kind of a sound. And I did that, and we got an immediate response.
Wow.
And then I did it again, and then from the location where we heard that knock, it moved. It moved from like a 1 o'clock position to a 3 o'clock position. And then it moved from a 3 o'clock position to a 6 o'clock position, and it knocked again, unsolicited. And then something else in front of us at the 12 o'clock position knocked. So we were essentially flanked and surrounded. So it went, okay. I think it's worth talking to these folks about maybe doing a recording project. So we started recording, and Donna left her recorder out for the better part of a year, maybe 5 out of 7 nights of the week. And we just got some very interesting recordings over that period of time. It takes a toll, and I don't want to get into some personal stuff, but it does. These kinds of things do take a toll, and I told them from the very beginning that if you need to pull the plug at any moment, if this becomes too overwhelming, please let me know, because your sanity is more important than me getting, a wood knock recorded or a scream or a howl or whatever. So the really cool part about it is that they were very skeptical of, and we would go back and forth sometimes over what was recorded. Well, that could be this. And she was usually the one that would say, it's not what you think it is. So it's refreshing to have a witness that's more skeptical than yourself. So But eventually they did end up having to move. So they are no longer at that location.
What kind of recorders do you prefer using?
Well, it's a personal one. Everybody has their personal. Mine is an Edirol Roland. I like it because of the way I record. I place a recorder out in the field and let it run all night long on batteries, and replace the cards every day and batteries every day. Now, as the recorder records, it has the Roland Edirol has a function where it'll split a file as it's recording seamlessly. So it'll roll from one file to the next. So I set it up in 30-minute segments, approximately, because my software that I use to analyze it can handle that size file better than it can a really large file. Anything over 150 megabytes, and there's a chance that it won't load. So I standardized on a specific rollover or certain file size, 64 megabytes, and it rolled over to another file. So for me, that's really important. Rather than having one file for an overnight recording, I'll have 24, 25 files. But I can load I can load the smaller files onto my software to look at it much easier.
Now, if a person was wanting to get involved using audio recorders as a tool and needs to do it on a budget, what kind of recorder would you recommend?
Well, I started out on an Olympus digital handheld recorder, but at some point the ambient noise is going to become just too much, and you're going to want something a little better. So you can record with just about anything. I've had people send me recordings that they got off of their phone.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Now, one of the things that I do as well as analyze is I edit. I have a software called Spectral Layers that I work with that allows me to edit in a spectrogram, which is a visual way of looking at the audio that tells you exactly where that sound resides, and the peaks and valleys and all the nuances of the sound. I can enhance, and all of the sounds around it I can diminish, which will make for a more pleasing and sometimes something that is so faint becomes really forward now when I go through the exercise of working with that. So that that's part of what I do. That I've taken really bad recordings and made them palatable with that software. So to go dial it back, if you use a recorder and it does have a lot of noise, but you've captured something interesting, I have the ability to edit that. Oh, there goes my dogs. I don't know if you can hear them or not. Mom's home.
Well, we love dogs, and why don't you tell us about your dogs?
Okay. Well, I've got three. Two that are 10 plus years old, and then one that is 2.5. And the 2.5-year-old is about 160-pound English Mastiff. So he gets a little excited. Riley Bear, or Riley Bones, as I call him, he's about 150 pounds. He's part shepherd, part flat coat retriever, and he's just big.
Wow.
And then we have the character of the group is Monty. He's a Catahoula leopard dog. And being from the South, you may know or have heard of those dogs. They're swamp dogs, bear dogs. They're big. They're an oversized pit bull.
Wow. Well, your dogs may not want to check, but I'm sure they'll take some treats instead.
It's quieted down. I think mom's got the treats in their mouth, so I think we're good.
While we're talking about recorders, I thought that it would be a good idea just to show what I use. And this is a Sony ICD PX333. And I've got Ranger bands that I just keep it on my stick, and I usually put it in my boonie cap just for having an extra recorder, and that's what I started out with. And Larry's going to love me saying this, but if you use if you use lithium batteries,
yes,
and a 15 gigabyte micro card in it, SD card, then you can get over 1,000 hours out of it, and it'll usually record, depending on the ambient temperature, it'll record about 125 hours before the battery dies. And this is a Zoom H2N. I've got it on a tripod right now, but what I usually do is I made this box, and it fits up inside of the box, and it's really not meant to fool a Bigfoot, but it's really more meant to fool a hiker or something like that might come across, and maybe it's camouflaged a little bit. And then I also have an H4N, which the last two recorders record in a wave format, which makes it a whole lot easier if you do have to run it through a low pass or high pass because of maybe the insects were loud. It will give you a better recording. And you spoke a while ago, David, about the software that you use. Can you kind of elaborate maybe if there is freeware that people can use to upload off the internet to analyze captured audio?
Yes. Sonic Visualizer is the software that I use for analyzing in a spectrogram methodology. It gives me a very vivid sound print. Now, it's not a plug and play. It took me 2 years to learn the intricacies of it. It's one of those things where you just have to just start fooling around. And when we start doing that, you'll find different ways of loading it. But I've got a standard methodology that I use, standard protocol. I can load a file and be up and looking at it in a matter of minutes rather than, taking 5 or 6 minutes to load it. Anyway, that software is available. It does a great job. Some people like Audacity, and it also has, I believe that is freeware as well.
Yes.
And it has a spectrogram feature. Some people like that, claiming it's a little easier. It wasn't for me, but that's me personally. I also use another editing software called Nero Wave Editor, and that will help divide the clips. It also has some different things you can do, but it's not specific. Like my spectral layers, I can edit specific things. Within the Nero Wave Editor, it's a general pass, general filter. It filters the whole clip. with certain things that you do. But I find that I can get it to a certain level using my wave editor, and then fine tune it in spectral layers, and then even go back and increase the volume sometimes by entering back into wave editor. So it's a complicated process, but when I get done with some audio, they can't believe that we can hear the detail that that they didn't know was there.
One of the most frustrating things to me on the audio is whenever you're in the field and you hear it, what you record doesn't sound exactly what you heard.
Doesn't have the volume, doesn't have, no.
Is there setting? Is that recorder? Is that lost through digital format?
Yes. Keep going.
I ended that last one with a question mark.
Oh, okay. Well, you were right on all of those. And again, it's not an exact science what I do. There is some artistic license. Some are better than others. Some have a 10 ears, some have perfect pitch. I'm not claiming that I'm one or the other, but I do have kind of a knack and a feel, and that's what it takes. And that really is from making a lot of mistakes. You make mistakes and then you learn from that. So I'm not doing that. And you just keep refining your process till you get to where you hear. And here's what you really got to do is edit copies. Don't edit the real recording. Yeah, you leave your original recording pristine, period. And then make a copy and then edit all your copies. Because you may get to the point where you go, that just didn't work. I got to try it a different way, different filtering process. And so you have to start over. So you have to start over from the original, not something that you've already messed up.
I was really fortunate that when I first got in to wanting to find out, about going out in the woods and looking for Bigfoot, a feller by the name of Randy Savick took me under his wing and really taught me a lot. So I feel like that my learning curve really got jumped off really good. And another guy, we called him Really Super Dave, is kind of what he went by. Super Dave. And but he taught me about Sonic Visualizer. And that is such a great freeware out there that one can use, especially if you're on a budget, and to really look and see what you're looking at.
Yeah, Monongahela tuned me into Sonic Visualizer back in 2010 when I was bemoaning the fact that I fell asleep listening to one of my recordings. He says, "Why are you listening to him?" And I said, "What do you mean? How else am I supposed to analyze it?" And I hadn't a clue about visual audio analysis yet, because I was just familiar with waveforms. And he says, "Oh, you don't know what a spectrogram is?" No. So yeah, he taught me all about that, and I've hit the road running. So it's actually a form of science called bioacoustics, analyzing spectrograms. So you can talk science with science people when you say that you analyze spectrograms. I'm a bioacoustician.
And we actually put a link to his website. I believe it's a blog maybe, but there is a lot of great stuff on there. Yeah. So just make sure that you check the comment section and click on it. And we also have the Olympic Project, and probably something that that we will talk about later is the Macaulay
Okay.
Library.
Yes.
And I put them on there.
Okay. I'll just follow your cue.
Well, Larry, are you ready to listen to a little audio?
Man, I'm ready.
Okay. Now, this first clip is tagged one of my favorite howls and wood knocks. And so we will, as soon as I find it, we will play it now. I believe it plays 5 times.
Okay.
Well, I was wrong as usual.
3 times?
It played 3 times.
Yeah. That's what I could see. After you said that, I thought, well, I'll correct him afterwards.
I get corrected a lot, David.
I'm
Yeah.
married. I'm
Hey,
married, and I'm supervised, so I know what correction means. So you want me to talk about
Yes.
why that's a favorite? Okay. It's rare to get a nice long vocalization, but to get a good clear wood knock in the middle of it is even more rare. When you get a howl and a knock, it becomes even harder to discount it. I mean, you can discount a howl and you can discount maybe a knock, but when they're together, the suspicious meter rises. So lots of times there are responses that are different than vocalization, and sometimes there are just vocalization responses. But the 2 different types of vocalizations or auditory stimulus is what is interesting to me.
Now, this second clip is tagged, it's a long howl. And so we will go ahead and play that now. David, in this social media, fast food, drive-through, armchair research graduates of the University of Bigfoot will be quick to correct you and say, nope, that was a coyote or fox or whatever. Can you elaborate why this is not a coyote or a fox or a bear or whatever?
Wolf.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked a little bit about being adamant about what you were recording, Mark. We've discussed that. I usually ascribe suspiciousness, if I can use that term, to all recordings. And I say that because you cannot prove something is a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
You can only eliminate the fact that it could be a coyote, or it could be a mountain lion, or it could be a cow, or by looking at the vocalization rather than listening to the vocalization. Now, I want to give a little bit of background about this particular recording. I did not record this. I did edit it, but I did not record it. It was recorded by John Andrews, one of the people that I consider one of the best in the field at capturing audio recordings. He recorded this with a group of other investigators in the Cascade Mountains. There is some context to this. I don't want to get too elaborate, but they were very certain, and I've heard the other recordings that go with this, that they were having a tremendous amount of activity around them that particular night. So there is the context of the actual witnesses that were there when this was recorded. There's something that's interesting that can only be seen in a spectrogram, and this is something again that I did not know. I was taught this by Monongahela. He has a term for this, and it's called an attenuated fundamental. And attenuated is another term for missing, and fundamental is where the main vocalization resides. Now, it looks like you have a visual of that audio there, but if you know what a harmonic is, you know that it's a mathematic progression. Let's say a vocalization is at the 500 hertz level, and that's the first line that you would see at the bottom. And the second vocalization harmonic above that resides at 750 hertz, we'll say, just for ease. Well, that's impossible. A harmonic is double the first main fundamental. So if the main fundamental again is at 500 hertz, the first harmonic is at 1000. Well, if you look at that, you will see, well, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not what happened here. Actually, the main fundamental is not represented by anything visually. It's missing, but it's really there. Excuse me. And now I can prove that by a recording. I sent you a spectrogram that's we're not looking at, but in that spectrogram I had an audio specialist, a vocal impersonator, mimic this vocalization. And in that, you can see where that main fundamental resides. That's missing in the suspicious one that we're looking at here. You can clearly see it in the human, and clearly see it's missing in this particular vocalization. The other thing is that the upper harmonics, and this is something, again, Mark, you and I talked about the other day, they seem to be missing in the higher ranges on suspicious sounds that we think may be a Sasquatch vocalization. Where on this particular image, you're at the upper limit, which is right around 2000 hertz. It doesn't seem to reside any higher than that in the audio that I have that I think might be related to Sasquatches. So those are some of the things that you can learn. Now, can I claim that this is a Sasquatch? No, but sort of kind of goes in that direction, doesn't it, by some of the evidence that you can see. Now, John did have this audio examined by other specialists. He sent it to, if you're familiar with the Skinwalker Ranch, there was a scientific group, the National Institute for Discovery Sciences. He sent the audio to them to have them review it. They got back to him and said, well, we're not really the specialist that you're looking for, but we do know who the guy is, and he's at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So they sent that file to him. He did analyze it, and he did say that there were certain things in that that were out of the range of human capability, but because of the fact he only had this particular recording, their sample size was too small. So you know how science works; they work on large sample sizes. So they encouraged him to go out and get more recordings.
You know, one thing that I tell people is every animal has their own frequency signature. And
Yes.
that's one thing that is just as you said. We cannot say that it is a Sasquatch, but what we can say, it does not match any other known animal frequency signatures. And so
that we can find. Yeah, because we can say that we have searched high and low. Well, you may have searched high and low, like within. You want to talk about the Macaulay Library of Sounds now?
Sure.
Okay. So the Macaulay Library of Sounds is what I call a disinterested third party. They have no skin in the game. They send people out into the field and record specific creatures that they see and hear. So that's key. They see and hear the same creature that's making the audio recording. They testify to that. They document it. They send it to the library and say, put this in file, and they save it under a documented name. So if I were to tell you, you send me a file that says, I think I have a Sasquatch here, and I listen to it and I go, I think that's a coyote. And I go to the Macaulay Library of Sound, I pick out, oh yeah, that's the one, that's the match. I match it up visually. I make copies. I send it back to you and I say, now take a look at that coyote signature and look at your signature. Pretty much identical. Oh yeah. Okay. Well, so now we have a way of looking at the evidence as is presented. We take our ears out of it because our ears are not really good at getting consensus. People have, like I said before, they have 10 ears. Some people have perfect pitch. So we're not all hearing the same sounds. So visually, we have a better way of looking at something and coming to some common agreement upon what we are seeing, rather than depending upon our ears.
And you know, one thing that I like about the Macaulay Library is they give it a file case number. Right. So it is actually documented who did it, where it was, and you know, the whole vocalization. So you know you're not going to be, you know, tricked, or you know, our senses can fool us.
Yes, we're fallible.
Okay, this third clip will play 5 times. And
yes, it does.
You stop laughing, Larry Ports, a second.
I'm glad David's directing you so I don't have to.
And it is of 5 whoops, and we will listen to it now, and then we'll talk about it after we play it. Those were pretty awesome whoops. Even
I thought so.
And you know, with me, did you clean that file up? Because that file is really clean.
Yeah, I did. Like I said, I cleaned most of my files up, and that's another thing is that I like to tell people that these are edited. So that we don't have any Sherlock Holmes out there going, aha, those were edited.
Yeah.
So yes, they are edited, but they're edited in a spectrogram. I see exactly what I'm editing. I'm not adding. I'm not subtracting. And again, I have the original, so we can always look at the original. So you can look at my work if you disbelieve me. So regardless, yeah, no, I really do like those whoops. To be clear, that's a single whoop that was recorded. I just looped it 5 times. I find that people, rather than have them say, could you play that again for me? I just loop it so that because about the 3rd time it starts to kick in what it is that you're hearing real clearly. So the first time you don't quite get it. Second time maybe. The 3rd time, aha. And by the 4th time it's okay, I get it. And then one more time, the 5th time, just for good measure.
Well, I'm going to get you to talk about when you are editing, because that is kind of a science, because if you're not careful, you will introduce artifacts into that.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. So I take as much precaution as I can to eliminate the possibility of introducing artifacts. So I go back and forth. I listen to the original. I listen to my editing. If I don't like it, I will trash it and start all over. So again, it's a precision thing, and again, I think you need to have a proclivity towards it, or some abilities. And I'm not trying to tout my horn. Some people will listen to that and go, I don't like that. So it's it's in the ear is in the beholder, if I can say it that way.
Well, it's important to know the capabilities and the constraints of your audio recorders, the software program that you are using to analyze this captured audio.
Right. And most of this, again, is for, I do a lot of presentations in large public formats where clarity is really a big need. It's difficult over loud sound systems to have a lot of static in the background to play these audio clips. So people say, "Oh, he's over editing." Well, there is a reason, and again, I still have the original recording. So if you want to listen to the original, I can provide that.
Okay, let's listen. Now, the 4th and 5th clips are combined in one slide. So we will listen to these clips, and I'm really interested into talking about these. So we'll play them now. David, that almost sounded like a language.
Well, over the years and what I've recorded and what others have recorded, there seems to be something along the lines of phonemes where I can hear vowels and consonants, and each area seems to have a little variation. I haven't found any specific repeatable language type sounds from one area to the next. Now, I'm going to backtrack that a little bit. There are vocalizations that have short bursts of phoneme streams that I have recorded, but it's rare. It's not common like you might think. if you were going to hear a language. But I've recorded mimicry enough to know that they can, or I'm recording something that can say people's names, call dogs names. So there is some sort of ability to mimic, and that means that they can have the possibility of speaking. So I'm sure that there is some sort of a language. I have only recorded something similar to Ron Moorhead Sierra sounds once, and it was so interesting that I emailed him a clip, and he said, he emailed me back and says, "Why are you sending me my stuff?" But that was only one time. So I would think that out of all the recordings that I would get something more like what Ron has recorded more often. But these are pretty good examples right here of something that's, it sure sounds like it's trying to use language. What do you guys think?
Well, we have actually heard it. And Larry, why don't you tell about what happened to us up in Ohio?
Well, we had previously the night before had a lot of activity, and one guy was getting harassed in his little coffin tent. So I told him I would stay up the next night, and he was probably 60, 70 yards from where I was in a hammock. And I was going to keep the FLIR, and he was going to contact me if something came over there, and I was going to try to catch it on FLIR. But I'd stayed up all night, and Eric, one of the guys, he sets his alarm for 3:30. I thought my shift was over with. I thought it was about daylight, and I still had 2 hours left. So about an hour after that, behind me, probably 50 yards or so, I hear something in a loud voice go, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, yeah." We're in the middle of nowhere. This is 4:30 in the morning, and that is the only sound I heard the whole night was that. And I don't know what it was saying, or sounded frustrated, but that's what I heard, and we recorded it, and that's about all I know.
Well, that's good enough.
Yeah. But that's the only time that I have heard any type of words or whatever you want to say used. I've not heard any other except that.
Well, over the last year, I started thinking, I probably should start looking at categories of sounds that I have captured and start grouping them by category. And I have a list of about 29 things that I have found that's been repeated across the country. I don't know if you want me to list all of them, but that's what I think is going to tie this all together. If we can find commonality in regards to areas that we are studying, what we think is Sasquatch in the area, like we have the nest area that we are working with in the Olympic project. We've just started doing some really intensive audio recording, and it's paying off. So we may be able to tie audio sounds of interest, suspicious sounds of interest, in the same area that we have recent activity that's tied to the nest area. So all of these things start to come together, but finding commonality and predictability is what we're up to.
Right.
Well, it's pretty impressive with what you're doing. And I just would like to say how much I appreciate what you share personally. And because there's so much to learn, and we should be looking to learn from one another. And
Yeah.
um, I tell you, I would like to talk about the baby print.
Oh,
Uh,
the foot impression?
yes,
This one?
that one.
Okay, from the beginning?
From the beginning. Yeah, let's hear the story.
Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. Getting some frogs in my
Uh,
throat here. um, Back in 2010, there was this location that I went to every fall. It was a reservoir of water that would drop seasonally. They would start draining the reservoir after Labor Day. People would less frequent the location. Somewhere about the middle of September, bow hunting would be become a little bit active in the area, and then people most likely didn't go to the lake. I mean, you would rarely see people there when you went up. Um, and I found that there were barefoot impressions that were being found as the lake receded, which meant that they were happening frequently, coming back to this lake. And then by the time October would hit around, I mean, you would have uh, temperatures in the freezing area. So people walking around in bare feet just didn't make a lot of
yeah.
sense. So most of the impressions that I found there were of human size. There were a couple of exceptions. One of them was a what I called skinny foot, which was a very narrow impression, to the point where you go, well, that couldn't possibly be Bigfoot. That's way too narrow. But it got up to 15 and a half inches long, and it went from an 11 to 15 and a half inches over a 3-year period.
Wow.
So it was the same footprint year in and year out as I would come back. And it was traveling with one footprint that was consistent. It was traveling with a footprint that was 12 inches long, that was wide, much wider than you would think a person's foot would be. Probably not out of the realm of possibility, but it was 12 and a half inches long. So it was, right on that cusp of maybe, maybe not. But considering the circumstances, it always intrigued me to go back there. So that's the context of why I kept going back to this location. So on this particular day, I'm with my wife Terry and another investigator, and they're in one area of the lake looking at things, and I'm at another area looking at things. And across the my radio comes my wife. She had just found some impressions. She said they're really little though, and I said, well, how little? She said, well, maybe 6 or 7 inches. And I said, well, that's probably human, but let me come over and look. So I came over and I looked, and there was this trackway of very small impressions that were 6 and 7 inches long. And I said, I'll tell you what, this is your first find. They're probably human, but I'll cast them for you. So we marked the location, and I wanted to continue walking around the lake just to see if I could find some larger impressions, which I did. And so it's later in the day, and we're headed back, and almost get to the car, and I went, oh, shoot, I was going to cast those impressions for Terry. So I said, I'll give me 15 minutes, and I'll be down there and back, and we'll be headed home. She said, okay. So I rushed down there. I didn't measure. I didn't have of course, I didn't have my camera. I didn't have all the tools that you do to document a footprint. I just wanted to cast them for Terry because this was her first find of, impressions in the mud. So I did. I cast them, and I had made a little bit too much casting material, so I had about a spatula and a half of material, and I was looking for a place to dispatch it. And I looked down at my knee, and about 3 inches away was this. And that, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It's only 3 3/4 inches long, which is about the size of a normal baby 11, 12-pound newborn. That's the length. The length of the foot is about right, but not the dimensions. The dimensions are all out of whack. This heel right here is almost 2 inches. I can't think of a newborn that would have a heel that well developed. Most newborns, and there's a picture in the scroll thing that's going around on the podcast that I had some baby and bronze impressions there that show you what a typical baby impression is like. There is a break that goes all the way through the foot, right at where the mid-tarsal break should be. It stepped on a stick right here. There's an indentation, and there's fatty material that's being pushed to the side right here. So there's all sorts of reasons why this probably is, I think, is something other than just a typical human footprint. I think what has happened was it was being carried by that 6 or 7 inch footprint. So it makes me suspicious as to what that was now that I thought was human. I think it was holding it, and it wriggled free and got a foot down, and was able to conform to the mud that was there. I don't think a human baby would have left an impression to the depth that this did. This was very deep, considering the composition of the soil. So I cast that, and as years gone by, the more I look at it, the more interesting it becomes. It was quite a find for me personally. I was hoping for something this big, but I'm pretty excited. I got something this big.
That's pretty cool, no doubt about it.
Well, Larry, I guess, man, time is slipping by. I guess we better jump on some of these questions, and I will start out because I got an email from my buddy Doug Schotter, and this is quite lengthy, so I will just go ahead and read the whole thing. Doug wrote, some years ago, I had watched a program where audio specialists at a university were given audio of a suspected Sasquatch howl. The recording did not match any known animal in their database, and it was quickly determined to not be mechanical or manipulated. The analysts were able to determine through something akin to re-engineering the size of the voice box, lung capacity, and the stature, etc. it would take to create what was recorded and analyzed. When they then described was a creature similar in size to what a suspected and reported for a Sasquatch. I believe it is also not unlike, like from a footprint cast relative size. Do you recall seeing this program? It might have been on Monster Quest or maybe as far back as In Search of.
I thought I had seen just about everything, but this one is not ringing a bell with me. But there are software prior to what we've been using that scientists utilized. And I think that Ron Moorhead had his audio analyzed using one of these specific techniques that showed where, and maybe this is what he's talking about, showed where normal human patterns were within this parameter of the capabilities and size of our voice box due to the loudness of the particular audio and the range. And what Ron recorded was outside of this. So I'm not familiar with what that software is, but I do know that there are forensic specialists out there that detectives use for court cases to analyze audio that are well beyond my capabilities of understanding how that software works. But it has been my dream that one day our paths will cross, that somebody in this particular field will either through an interest of their own or somebody will approach one. But forensic audiologists are probably the wave or where we're going to go next. I don't know if I really answered his particular question. Other than no, I did not hear that specific program, but I am aware of other softwares out there that probably can do what he described. And so I think that was probably a real scientific analysis.
I tell you, that's really interesting, and it's just another piece to the puzzle.
Yes. Yeah. So mark my words, audio forensic analysis is the way where we're headed, and with somebody that's credentialed. See, what I'm doing is amateurish. But when somebody with credentials speaks up, people are going to pay attention. So we just have to keep collecting the audio, and I've got tons of it. Someday somebody may want to look at it.
Yeah. Larry, how about the next question?
The next question comes from me.
Okay.
A tough one. Jeez.
I doubt it. One of the most common sounds we hear in the woods is a wood knock. Is it your educated opinion that it's actually a possible Bigfoot carrying around a stick hitting wood, or do you think it's possible it's a sound they're making with their hands, popping their mouth?
Yes, I do believe that they can make sounds other than hitting wood on wood. And sometimes those sounds are close enough that we mistake it for a wood on wood knock. They knock rocks. They knock rocks on wood. They knock two logs together. Sometimes it's a thud. So there's just a plethora of percussive sounds. I have so many different categories in the percussive sound genre: drumming, mouth pops, clicks, a thing that I call percussive voice. You've never heard of that. I know what it is. I can do a half an hour sometime to explain that, but there's obviously something happening with their voice box that's creating percussive sounds and in a speech pattern. So that's why I came up with that particular category. But yeah, chest beating.
Yeah.
They I say they do. I suspect they do,
Right.
since we haven't proven that they're out there. But my suspicion is that they do chest beats like gorillas do chest beats. Um, and I've got some really good audio to compare, and it's identical to a gorilla doing a chest beat. Um, so yeah, the thing that tipped me off was that first witness that I talked about working with back in 2007. He was on location and he heard a wood knock, but then he could hear running and he heard the same wood knock. That would mean that he's whatever was doing that would have to hit the same tree to make the same sound, because I'm sure you've hit different trees and their different timber and different sounds.
Uh-huh.
So, but it was identical sound. And he said it ran, a couple 100 feet, making that wood knocking sound as it was running. So it was doing something other than, standing at a tree and whacking it.
Right. That makes sense because usually the tones are similar, if not the same.
Right.
And it would be difficult for a Sasquatch to be walking and hear us come or hear us make a vocal and it, okay,
Right.
I'm going to take my stick off my back and hit this tree.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. It doesn't have, where did it have the stick again?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I was just wanting to get your opinion on that, and you explained it well.
Okay.
So, Mark, next question.
Okay. Our friend Kate Ward from Paranormal Heart Podcast, she would like to ask David, do you bring any satellite phones or flares or something to call if something bad happens and y'all need some help?
No, we don't carry flares. We do travel in packs. I've always thought that there, for a multitude of reasons, that you go out with a group of people. I'm not of the opinion that you should be out there alone. That's up to you, but I typically don't. And when we're on expeditions, we're usually in groups of 5 or more. So I feel that there in these circumstances there's safety in numbers. So that's my no. I don't carry flares, but there are things that we do teach that you need to have in your backpack for safety, and mostly building a fire, so that if you're stuck out there and you know that it's going to be an overnight situation and you weren't planning for it, you have 6 ways of making a fire, 6 ways of starting a fire, multitudes of things to keep you warm, things to keep you safe. What do you do to keep your mental acuity going? How to not panic, how to be safe.
Good answer.
Yes, sir. David, do you have any YouTube channel or anywhere that you post some of your audio evidence?
No. Is the short answer. I have a ton of it, and someday I have dispersed it. This last year I went and I started thinking, if something were to happen to me, nobody would know anything that I have collected over the last 10 years. So there was a certain group of people that I gave my audio collection to. So if I should pass, there's some people that you already know that you should start, hey, where's that audio he said he had stashed? I want it.
Okay, Kate from Paranormal Heart Podcast asked another question. What do you think of infrasound?
Well, I think it's a possibility. I think that a lot of people think you can measure it with standard audio equipment, but I can tell you that most audio recorders are geared around our hearing capabilities, and most of them feel that there's no need to record something below our hearing that we can't hear. So a lot of them have, or most of them, have around 40 hertz is the cutoff.
Yeah.
Now that's not only in the recorder but also in the microphones. So you have two components there. Now, um, that being said, there are some bioacousticians that are aware of this and have made special recorders that can and microphones paired together. But there was a study that was done on elephants. They were studying the infrasound made by elephants and wanted to record that. So they made the instruments that were capable of going that low. But I think it's a two-part question. Do I think that they have that capability? I think that's very, very possible. It would explain some of the weirdness that happens in the field, that people suddenly don't feel themselves. They feel strange. They become antsy, and all of that is symptoms of being introduced to infrasound being present. So, I don't know. I mean, we just don't have enough evidence, but there's a lot of reports of that in the field. So it's very, very possible.
All right, I'm going to ask two questions here. One of them's pretty quick. Mark, Mark asked, anybody know the model of the Roland recorder? And Heather asked, have you ever spoken to a linguist regarding your recordings?
The only linguist that I've worked with, I'll do this backwards, is Monongahela. He is a cryptolinguist, so he's really my only source there. I do have a possibility of something that's kind of on the horizon that I'm not at liberty to discuss quite yet. It may or may not happen, so I don't want to get my hopes up until it does. But yeah, I do desperately at some point in time want to get beyond the amateurish status of where I am with my sounds. I've taken it as far as I can personally. So they're correct, and that needs to be done. So now that I've done it backwards, what was the first part of the question?
The model of the Roland recorder.
Okay, the model is an Edirol, and I think the last edition was RO5. So Edirol, EDIROL 05.
All right.
Okay, Jamie Harms and Debbie Jones both ask a similar question. I'll read both of them. And they're referring to the baby print. And,
yes.
And what type of plaster is this? Haven't seen black before. Oh. And what type of plaster is blackish gray that he is using? And I believe I know the answer. But
it's not plaster,
right?
It's okay. I did the original cast, which I still have. I have the original foot, and that's cast in hydrocal white. And from that, I made a mold that has a resin and black dye and real bronze powder. So it's a bronze, it's called cold cast bronzing. You can do an internet search on that methodology. That's how I found it. And because of the of the status of the foot, or what it was so impressive to me. I decided I wanted to do something special than just make plaster casts out of it. So I've made solid bronze casting, cold bronze casting. So that's what that is.
You should shoot a tutorial video on that. Just a
Sure.
suggestion. But that would be really cool, and that could be helpful to people.
Oh yeah, I think that if you find a footprint that's worthy of saving, you definitely want to do this, because that print is not going to break. Period.
Right.
And that's the issue with making a plaster is the worst. Hydrocal is a little bit better, but you really do need to know how to strengthen the cast so that at the weak point, because a lot of times in Bigfoot footprints there is the mid-tarsal break, and the casting becomes very thin in that location. And if you've ever seen broken footprints, that's why. It's just too weak, doesn't support the weight. So you have to do what I call a rebar method, and I use aluminum fencing stakes.
Huh. Interesting. Larry?
I call them stakes, but they're actually ties, aluminum fencing ties.
All right. The next question comes from Kat from Paranormal Heart Podcast, but I'm not sure how you're going to be able to answer it because you left all your measuring stuff and all that in the vehicle. But how deep were the baby prints? Because she's interested to know how heavy they are.
Let's see if I can find a measuring tool.
Uh-oh.
It's about an inch deep on the heel itself. And at the toe, it's a half inch at the toe.
What type of soil was it in?
The great thing about that lake is it's a composite of ash and clay, and they hold the prints really well. I mean, I have dermal ridges that are in the impression itself.
That's
so cool. It picked those up. So
okay. Ray Dahl asked, do you know who Scott Nelson is?
I do.
Okay. She is asking, has he heard the vocals? And I'm not sure which vocals.
Well, I have to back up a little bit with Scott. I am really good friends with Ron Moorhead, and I have sent some things to Scott. He's really only interested in sounds that are very similar to the Sierra sounds. He's looking for specific details, and he doesn't have a lot of spare time that I've found. I'm not knocking Scott or saying anything bad, so please don't go there. Scott's a great wealth of knowledge and has done a tremendous job with Ron, but he's really only interested in something that's very similar to what Ron captured. And I only have one recording that's like that. So he's not interested in long calls, long howls and things of that nature. Speech is what he's looking for.
right.
And even though we think we have some things with speech, again, it's basically how much time does he have to look at stuff. And he's really taking Ron's stuff to a deeper and deeper level. So I think he's continually delving into that and finding more and more things. So,
well, Larry, our good friend Shane
Oh,
Corson. No, I'm going to let
He's
you.
looking for money. He's looking for money. No.
I just wanted to shout out to Shane before you read his question. That's all, Larry. I ain't stealing your question.
He wants to know if the check's in the mail.
That's the least he wants to know. He asked, "What is your favorite vocal or percussive sound that you've recorded? And have you ever thought of becoming a male model?"
Dear Shane, put the scotch down. It's obviously affecting his vision. Okay, what was the first part again? I'm getting old and I can't remember. What was my most favorite vocalization? I think my aha moment was when I was looking for the Wahoo, any information I could get on what Daniel Boone's story was, that he had killed a Wahoo or whatever, because I always thought that that terminology or slang is probably because they make a sound like that.
It's kind of like a barking type vocalization that a baboon makes. Am I correct?
You are absolutely on the nose. I was doing an internet search for that, for not for that sound, but for Daniel Boone's story, and I came across it was a Wahoo baboon bark, and I went, "Oh, you got to be kidding me! This isn't really." So I watched the video, and I went, "I've recorded that." So I did find a comparison to that. So that was probably up there, very high on my list of favorite vocalizations. That finding something that is natural in nature, but not here in Washington State. And then guess what? I have found it in other recordings that people have sent me all over the country: North Carolina, Alabama, Arkansas. I mean, it's more prevalent than and variations of that. So that is a very important sound that I look for. So okay. I think that was right up there.
Okay, Kate Ward asked another question, and she puts it in a statement, but I'm going to put it in a question form. Okay. The Olympic project, is there a database that people can reach out and find that, not just audio evidence, but other evidence that they would be able to compare with their own research?
We have a webpage, olympicproject.com, that we really don't, there's not anybody in the group that we have fleshed out that would really like to keep it up to date and maybe try and do other things. I am so busy with what I do. That's just not that's not my predilection. I wish I was, but I'm not. And so it's not in Derek's thing nor Shane's, but we'll find somebody eventually that really wants to take the bull by the horns and get that information that you would like to see, that you could do comparison. So doing like what I do when I discovered that sound's made in Alabama. So, I know where she's going. The database would really be helpful for a lot of researchers.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Ray Dahl asks, have you or anyone on your team experienced an up-close visual event?
I have.
Okay.
Next question.
Pull it out.
You want details?
I believe she would like details.
Okay.
Ellie?
Very close to where we have our Olympic project cabin. I was on a expedition in 2009. So in this particular area, there had been visual sightings of one. So we camped on an upper portion overlooking the area where the main body of campers were going to be. On another road, we had a thermal device, no recording capability. I swear to God, it only happens when you have, no recording capability.
Yeah.
But we were sharing the optical FLIR. It was just a monocular one lens, but it was doing a very good job. It was clear. And as I was panning a clear-cut area in the brush, there appeared to be what I thought was probably an elk laying down. And it was so wide that it had to, it seemed to be about the right width of an elk. So I just watched it, and then it stood up. And it wasn't an elk. It had the head the size of a watermelon, and it looked cartoonish. The shoulders were bowling balls. It had very long arm, but the brush cut it off at about the waist. So I'm guessing it was 7.5, maybe 8 feet tall, but it was monstrously wide at the shoulders, and just there isn't a human bodybuilder that could accomplish this. And I thought I was, well, I don't know if you can see in the background, there's a picture right there. Okay. Very similar to that as far as like the shoulders. That's why I got this painting from Michael Beers, because he kind of captured that. I mean, it was just, it was left me speechless, but there was no question about what I was looking at.
Right.
Wow. Okay, Lane Goodspeed has a request and says, could Mr. Ellis please make the wood knock sound again?
Oh, this one?
There you go, Lane. That's impressive.
Yeah, it is.
Well, that's something I taught myself on a school bus on the basketball team coming back from long trips. So, so I found a use of something that was totally stupid.
All right, Doug Schroeder, he said, this is just for your information, David, that Dr. Madzinski found a similar adolescent trackway with evidence of adult picking up and carrying a young one periodically. You probably are aware of that, but he wanted to share that with you.
Yep.
All right. But Dave says, is the samurai chatter some claim to hear? You think it's like an Asian accent from them migrating this way from Asia back when there was a land bridge?
It's possible, but what I hear in most of my recordings is something that's a little more nasally and maybe hearing challenged, like they don't quite hear or they hear the tones differently than we do. That's what I have found. But as far as I think where he is going is, do we think the Gigantopithecus coming from Asia, that the who knows when they migrated, if if the language would have had that sound to it or not. My guess is not. But again, I don't want to throw cold water on what he thinks maybe a real observation. So it's possible. I just don't know.
Right.
Okay. This will be our last question. And so you can answer it the way that you would want to or not answer it. But Kate asks, she says, I have to ask, what are your thoughts on the woo?
On the woo?
On the woo.
Oh, my personal experiences, I don't know, but it's not something that is in my wheelhouse. I collect audio evidence, which I feel is physical. I collect footprint evidence, which is physical. That's my predilection. For me to weigh in on what may be a real aspect of Bigfooting doesn't do anybody any service. So I think that Ron Moorhead is part of the Olympic Project, and he has some physical theories or physics theories that seem to fit what he is thinking. We don't castigate Ron. We think that he's a great contribution to the works. So it's a possibility that there's things out there we don't understand. It's just not something I am personally drawn to, but I'm not going to throw cold water on it either.
Good answer. Okay, Larry, we are pushing 2 hours, and we have taken up enough of Mr. Ellis's time.
I'm looking for my dad. Where's Mr. Ellis?
Well, David, we would like to give you this opportunity to say any final comments.
Well, I just really appreciate the time. It's been a lot of fun. You guys are real professional in make me feel at ease to be myself, which is kind of corny at times. So you laugh at my jokes. Now I'm going to have to pay you guys. So I just really appreciate the opportunity to let folks know maybe a little bit more insight about the Olympic Project. We are a team of just absolutely incredible people with multi-talents. I often feel like, what am I doing in this group? I'm just an observer, but there are a lot of people with a lot of knowledge that can really help people if they get something that they think is worth a conversation or two. We're happy to throw in our 2 cents. If you find something of evidence that you think needs to be analyzed, we have folks that can do that. So, keep us in mind if you run across something that is a mystery that you think we might be able to help you with.
You are such a giving person, and I just appreciate you, because it's
well, thank you.
We all need mentors, and and you have quickly become one of mine.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll teach you what I know. It ain't much, but I'll teach it to you if you want to listen.
Larry, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I just want to thank Mr. Ellis for coming on here. It's been great. Great hearing his expertise, and he has fielded all our questions with some great answers, and I feel like everybody has probably walked away from this learning something, and I hope Mark can learn how to visually analyze sound now.
Do you mean Shelley?
Oh, yeah, never mind. Shelley does all the analyzing.
Uh-oh.
All I do is lose the recorders when I'm out in the field. So, but
Well,
we do appreciate your time.
thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, I don't know what to say, but check out the links that are in the comment section, and this, for me, this is one of these shows that I will go back and watch and have a notebook and pen in my hand, so that that I can refresh my memory and then go and check some of these out. So just want to thank you again for coming on, David.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. You guys have been just wonderful. And you watch the mail, the money's coming. Okay.
Okay, well, Beast TV would like to welcome all of our new members on our Facebook page, and we really begun this page to train and help people with analyzing audio, but it is evolved into more than that. So if you are new and you haven't checked out the Files tab, there is a wealth of information that you may find beneficial. And if you are interested in contributing to the Bigfoot community, we would be thrilled to show you our protocols and in analyzing audio, and we could certainly use your help. We want to thank our new subscribers and our faithful followers. Also, be sure to check out our field evidence videos. And if there are any guests that you would like to see on Beast TV, just post their names in the comment section. And please, don't forget to hit the like button and leave us a comment. Larry and I would like to thank Debbie and Shelley and all of our moderators for all of the behind-the-scenes work they do. And check out our sister channel, Beast of the Woods. That's Larry's channel. Thanks again to David for coming on this week. And Beast TV just wants to add that we proudly stand behind Mr. Bob Gillen. So, with that said, we will see you again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Night, night, footers.
This has been a Sawdust production.